I have already done a video on a character named Renoir from Clair Obscure Expedition 33 who looked a lot like this one. And if you have already played and completed the game, you will know why that makes sense. And if you have not already played the game, what are you doing here? What interests me about these two characters is that they have identical motivations. They both want to save their family, but that shared motive drives them to pursue exactly opposite goals. One wants to erase the canvas while the other fights to preserve it. And neither Renoir is successful in the end, at least not on their own. The fate of the canvas is ultimately not determined by either of them, but instead by their children, by Maëlle and Verso. Of course, parent and child relationships are another important theme of the story, particularly the ways parents attempt to assert control over their children, not for malevolent or villainous reasons, but out of love to keep them safe. Meanwhile, the children tend to resist and rebel against that parental control to follow their own path. Before digging deeper into that, I want to discuss what I believe is the key difference between the two Renoirs. It is not that one is real and the other is fake, or that one is right and the other is wrong, or that one is a hero and the other is a villain. I do not think it would be accurate to label either of them as villains. A Deconstruction of Villainy is just the name of this video series, where I analyze video game antagonists. Apparently, I need to find some other title for more nuanced characters like Renoir and Clea, so viewers don't mistake this analysis for moral condemnation. Anyway, the real difference is that this Renoir, Maëlle's father, is fighting for the future, for change. His family has been trapped in a cycle of grief since the death of his son, and he wants them to move on. You can see this most clearly in the Reacher axon, she who reaches for the stars, which represents Maëlle not as who she is now, but who she could become if she manages to leave her grief behind and embrace the future. On the other hand, this Renoir, Verso's father, is fighting on the side of stasis, for his immortal family to just keep living and living in exactly this same place, in exactly this same way forever. This is something I have discussed in other videos. Characters who fight against change almost always fail. For example, Gwyn from the Dark Souls trilogy. He wanted to keep his Age of Fire going forever and ever and prevent the world from moving on to its next natural stage. And he fails spectacularly. He breaks his entire world. The reason why these characters tend to fail is because it speaks to a basic truth that we must all come to accept. Change is inevitable. You can either learn to adapt or else get left behind, which is exactly what happens to this version of Renoir. His inability to accept change leads to his annihilation. The same fate awaits both Aline and Maëlle, who are also choosing stasis. Aline is also refusing to move on, and her mind and body are literally falling apart as a result. If you side with Maëlle in the ending, you will see that her body is already beginning to undergo the same process. But let's get back to Renoir. I want to show you 3 examples where the 2 different versions of Renoir mirror each other. In each case, they say nearly identical lines, and each case reveals something about both of their characters. Okay, here's the first. This scene takes place in the camp after the survivors of Expedition 33 have reunited with CL, and they're hanging out and having a good time, and then suddenly something changes. Time freezes and Painted Alicia appears for the first time. As she reaches out towards Maëlle, she is interrupted by her father, and we are going to watch what happens next together. As you watch, pay close attention to his dialogue. Okay, here it is.
Alicia, I told you to stay home. It's not good for you to see this.
Alright, next we are going to watch the scene where Maëlle reunites with her father. This is after the defeat of the Paintress and after the reveal of her true identity. Here it is.
Papa.
Alicia. You're safe. I thought I told you to stay home.
Technically, my body's at home.
Both versions of Renoir say almost the exact same line. I told you to stay home. To be fair, there are some tonal differences. Mael's father feels slightly more affectionate, a bit lighter in his delivery, but the message is the same. I told you to do something, not because I'm being a jerk, but for your own good, to protect you. And you did not listen to me. You did not obey me. You chose to put yourself in danger instead. Both versions of Renoir have this need for control. In my previous video, when I described his character this way, I got a lot of pushback in the comments, which surprised me. After all, it is a word the writers themselves use in relation to his character multiple times in the game. It seems like people hear the word controlling and think it has to always mean something really terrible and negative. Like describing Renoir as controlling is equivalent to condemning him as an evil villain who must be stopped. However, in the context of parenting, it is not necessarily a negative. I mean, we want parents to exercise some control over their children, right? Especially over young children. You should not let a toddler do whatever they want. They will kill themselves. Killing themselves is actually what toddlers do best. Spend 5 minutes with a 3-year-old and you will be stunned by their utter lack of survival instincts. The problem that both versions of Renoir are running into is that, eventually, kids grow up. They begin resisting that control and making their own mistakes, and a parent's ability to intervene shrinks more and more. Another game I have written about extensively on this channel explores this exact same theme. In God of War Ragnarok, Kratos' son Atreus is growing up, and that is a problem. Kratos tries to keep his son on a metaphorical leash, not because he is an asshole, but because he loves his son and wants him to be safe. But Kratos totally fails. Atreus just keeps doing whatever the hell he wants. He makes reckless and dangerous choices, and every attempt to control him just pushes him further away. In the end, Kratos has to let go, not because he wants to, but because he has to. He chooses to trust his son, and allows him to depart on a journey that will take him far away from the safety of home. That is basically the same choice that Renoir makes at the end of this story. Despite all of his paternal instincts shouting at him to hold on as tight as possible to save his daughter, in the end, he has to let go, to trust her. There is nothing else he can do. I am not calling either of them villains when I describe them as having controlling characteristics. That is just what good fathers do until they can't anymore. But let's rewind back to those two scenes we watched earlier. There is a notable difference between these two situations. Mael is 16, that puts her right on the threshold of adulthood. She is not mature enough to be allowed to make all of her own decisions. I mean, she is literally killing herself here. But she is also already too old to fully control. When she says no, her father can try to beg, to plead, to persuade, to show her the right path, and even to use physical force to make her take the right path. But it all fails. She wins this battle. This is the core tension of their relationship. A father who wants what is best for his daughter, and a child who has already grown out of his reach. On the other hand, Alicia, despite her appearance, is not 16. She is like 80 years old. She is more than mature enough to make her own decisions, and yet her father is still treating her as a child, which I think speaks to this version of Renoir's inability to accept change. His daughter is already definitely grown up. Alicia is an adult, full stop. Unlike Mael, there is no gray area here, but her father refuses to acknowledge it. Okay, let's watch two more scenes where the two different versions of Renoir mirror each other. This one takes place during the final confrontation between Verso and his father inside the monolith.
If saving you means losing you, then so be it.
Alright, next we are going to watch part of the confrontation between Mael and her father at the end of the game. Here it is.
You can hate me, but that's a choice I must make. As your father, I must look out for you. Especially when you can't look out for yourself.
Both versions of Renoir deliver some form of the line, "I am going to save you whether you like it or not." Maelle's relationship with her father is an exact mirror to Verso's relationship with his. Both fathers want to save their children from themselves. Maelle wants to remain inside the canvas, which will kill her eventually, and Verso wants to erase the canvas, which is essentially a form of suicide. He will be erased along with it. Neither Renoir can just sit back and watch their child destroy themselves. They have to try to intervene, even if, as we have already discussed at length, that is not actually possible anymore. What really complicates matters is that both children have these conflicting virtuous and selfish motivations. Maelle wants to save the people of the canvas, which is great, but also she wants to hide in a fantasy world that makes her feel better, which is not so great. Verso wants to save his mother, which is a lovely motivation to have, but also he is miserable and depressed and wants to die, which is a not so lovely motivation. Every character here is written to be nuanced enough that the audience will be able to find reasons to both support and oppose them. It is really good writing. Both versions of Renoir believe that their children's well-being justifies the cost of their actions. They are willing to kill the expeditioners and the citizens of Lumiere if it means saving their own families. It is the exact same kind of choice that Joel makes at the end of The Last of Us. Joel and Renoir are very similar characters in what kinds of things they are willing to do in the name of safeguarding their child's life. The big difference between the two different versions of Renoir is what they are actually sacrificing. Maelle's father sacrifices the lives of the people of the canvas, who might not actually be real, depending on how you define real. Verso's father is willing to sacrifice his wife, and she is definitely real. There is no gray area there. Aline is going to die if she remains inside the canvas. She has already reached a state of extreme deterioration, and yet this version of Renoir never once acknowledges this. He keeps saying that he wants to save his family, but pretty soon, in her case, there is not going to be anything left to save. He seems to be trapped in denial, unable to see what is right in front of him. I cannot help but imagine some alternate universe where the two Renoirs chose to work together to save both of their families. There is a middle path here, if they were just willing to sit down and talk to each other. It does not have to be one or the other. I think both versions of Renoir have this flaw where they choose force over diplomacy, which means they are incapable of resolving their differences. But let's move on. Let's examine one final set of mirrored scenes. First, we are going to watch two cutscenes involving Verso's father. The first comes after the death of Gustave, and the second is from that same confrontation in Old Lumiere that we watched part of before. As you watch these two cutscenes, pay close attention to how Renoir frames his motivations. What kind of language does he use? And what does Verso accuse him of? Okay, here it is.
This won't make sense to you now. But we both want what's best for our families. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle, but I did try to warn you.
You've lived more than a lifetime. It's time to let her go.
A lifetime. A lifetime with my family torn apart. No. I want my family back. How many times must you hurt our family?
No, you don't get to lecture me on family.
Why do you refuse to see I am doing this for us? Yet you insist on rushing toward death. You're trying to stop the wrong cycle.
You're doing this for yourself.
Of course. It's easier for you to think that, isn't it? Easier to betray us if I'm the villain.
Alright, next we are going to watch another cutscene involving Maelle's father. This also comes from the final confrontation. Here it is.
I cannot spend another day with living corpses. Since the fire, our family has crumbled. Aline in the canvas. Claire fighting a solitary war. You, a living ghost. Verso's death broke us. Want it to be fixed. I need it to be fixed. I cannot lose you too.
In both cases, there's a moment where Renoir slips. His language changes. In almost every other scene, he only speaks in terms of what his family needs. Their safety, their well-being, not himself. But then, in a moment of anger, his self-control slips and he starts shouting about what he needs, what he wants. He stops saying they and starts using the word I. I want my family back. I want it to be fixed. I need this. The writers are very intentionally using this shift in language to expose another layer of his motivations. It is not just about his family, it is also about satisfying his emotional need to make things right. Both Maëlle and Verso call this out. They accuse their fathers of acting selfishly. And to be fair, Clea describes her father in a somewhat similar way. She describes Renoir as being driven just as much by fear as by love. She says that he is afraid of failing to protect the ones he loves, of losing them too. Just like with the word controlling, the word selfish also seems to provoke knee-jerk reactions in the comment section. One comment on the last video actually called it disturbing that I would dare to describe a loving father this way. And maybe that is my fault. Maybe I did not communicate properly. So let me be very clear this time. This is not moral judgment. This is narrative analysis. We are looking at the choices the writers made and asking, why did they make this or that choice? And in these two scenes, the writers made a really deliberate choice to have Renoir frame his motivations in terms of his needs. That matters. If we are serious about understanding his character, we cannot ignore that. Now, this does not mean that Renoir is a villain or a narcissist or someone who does not really care about his family. Quite the opposite. His love for them is so deep, so absolute, he cannot let go because that would mean confronting his own powerlessness, his own helplessness, and that is something he cannot bear. So yes, the writers did include an aspect of selfishness within his character, but it is just that, an aspect. One small slice of a much larger and messier emotional pizza. It does not erase, override, or even outweigh the very real love Renoir has for his family. He is selfish because his love for his family is so strong. So Verso's accusation of "you're doing this for yourself" or Maëlle's "you want control" are both true but incomplete. He is doing this for himself because he is doing it for them. The two motivations are inseparable within his character. He wants control because he cares. And this selfishness is not exclusive to Renoir. It runs through every single major character in the story. You can see it in Aline, abandoning her real family and her real-world responsibilities, and using the lives of her painted creations to numb her own grief. You can see it in Maëlle, who clings to the canvas for the same reason, to escape her pain. You can see it in Verso, who lies to the expeditioners, manipulates them, leads them to their death, not just to save his mother, but because he is tired of this life. He wants to die. You can see it in Gustave when he considers abandoning his mission and his responsibility to the expedition to keep Maëlle out of danger, even though she doesn't even want to be kept out of danger. None of these characters are perfect paragons of virtue, and none of them are evil. They are messy, conflicted, and human. They are driven by the same unstable mix of love and fear, and by a desire not just to control their own lives, but the lives of the people they care about too. I think the writers are trying to portray a more complicated vision of love. As paradoxical as it may sound, love can sometimes be a selfish emotion. If you really, really love someone, sometimes it can lead you to be possessive, anxious, or even cruel. Love can be weaponized, used to justify violence or excuse heavy-handed dominance. And both versions of Renoir cross that line. They both use love as a rationale for killing and overriding others' choices. Just because Renoir is motivated by love does not mean he is automatically right. And just because there is a selfish aspect to his motivations also does not automatically mean he is wrong. His actions are portrayed as morally ambiguous. The writers leave it up to the audience to decide whether he is right or wrong. There is enough potential justification here that you could take either side. But the goal of this analysis is not to pick sides. It is to examine how the narrative is constructed and how the writers build moral complexity into a character like Renoir. Anyway, now that I am done arguing with the comments section of a completely different video, let's finish this video by watching 2 more cutscenes, both of which add another dimension to the painted version of Renoir. Okay, this first one takes place the night before the expedition travels to the monolith. Verso steps away to be alone and is confronted by both his sister and father. In this scene, painted Renoir does something that almost no other member of the Deconstruction family does. See if you can catch it. Okay, here it is.
But my son, do you know what it means to disappear into nothingness? Have you thought through the consequences? Not just for you, or even me, but for them. Their memories, their dreams, their love for each other. Who really is the one painting death, and who paints life instead? You think you're ready to pay the price, but are you willing to let them pay the price for you?
Something really fascinating about Clair Obscur is the way it shifts the audience attention. In the first half, the audience will be viewing the story from the perspective of the expeditioners. We have a really intimate look at their struggle in the face of extinction. But as the story progresses, that focus is displaced. Instead, the audience attention is redirected towards the private tragedy of the Deconstruction family. The murder of their son, the family ties broken by grief, the retreat into deadly escapism, the father fighting to save his wife and daughter at any cost. One by one, the Deconstructions are consumed by their own pain, and they do not spare much thought for the now forgotten plight of the expeditioners, all these innocent people caught in the middle. Even Maëlle, the person you would expect to most understand their humanity and their right to exist, never fully advocates for them. Instead, she ends up being more focused on her own need to escape. Something I really like about that scene we just watched is that this version of Renoir takes a moment to say, hey, wait, what about them? Sure, you are willing to sacrifice your life to save your mother, but what about their lives? Don't they deserve to have a choice too? Don't they at least deserve to know the truth of what they are fighting for? Of course, he does not really care about them. He is very willing to violently slaughter the expeditioners when he believes it will further his own goals. He is absolutely a hypocrite. But I just like that someone, somewhere in this story, acknowledges that the Deconstructions are not the only lives being impacted here. Alright, I want to watch just one more scene together. This one takes place during the final confrontation between Verso and his father inside the monolith. Here, Renoir reveals that he is actually not an identical copy of the real Renoir. Aline made one very significant change when she created him. Okay, here it is.
She's not the only one who grieves. The pain of losing you, she made me inherit it. Punishment, perhaps, for not being there when it mattered. I refuse to lose my son.
That son was a stranger.
But you're not. You're not.
You lost me years ago, and I lost you.
Let's focus on that line. The pain of losing you, she made me inherit it. And he speculates that this was a punishment, because the real Renoir failed to save their son. Maëlle makes a similar observation about Alicia. She suggests that Aline painted her with burn scars to punish her for her role in Verso's death. It seems that Aline became vindictive in her grief, lashing out not only at her real family, but even punishing their painted replicas, which is deeply unfair. These versions of Renoir and Alicia had nothing to do with it. They did not even exist when Verso died. But let's stay focused on Renoir. When he says that Aline made him inherit that pain, I take that literally. He feels the pain of Verso's death every minute of every day. He can never escape it. She made it a part of his DNA. And perhaps that explains why this version of Renoir is so stuck in the past. His inability to change, his denial. Maybe it is not his fault. Maybe it is the fault of his creator. She made him this way. In the confrontation between the two Renoirs here, the only time they ever appear on screen together, and apparently the only time they ever met, Painted Renoir speaks exclusively about the loss of Verso. If you erase him, you erase all that is left of your son. That is his only argument. For him, that is everything. He was created to care about Verso specifically more than anything else in the world. But for the real Renoir, who still has a living wife and daughter to save, that argument means nothing. He does not even respond. Of course, to be fair, the real Renoir probably has to live with the pain of his son's death every day too. It may be less of an excuse for Painted Renoir's behavior than I have suggested here. Another big difference between them is that eventually, the real Renoir is able to let go. Even though he is still afraid of losing his daughter, he chooses to trust her and leave the canvas on his own. The painted version of Renoir never reaches that state of acceptance. He is never able to let go and trust his son. For all their similarities, these are not the same man. Or maybe I am wrong, because at the end of the scene, this happens. In the end, this version of Renoir does not fight back. With a final declaration of love, he allows himself to be erased without putting up any resistance at all. So how do we interpret his behavior here? Has he accepted his fate and with it the fate of the rest of his family? They are going to be erased and there is nothing he can do about it. He has been outmatched. Maybe he could face Maëlle in battle, but he cannot defeat her father. Resistance is impossible. Or was he more capable of change and acceptance than I gave him credit for? Once again, summarizing this character is difficult. He has one of the strongest introductions of any antagonist I have ever examined on this channel. Expedition 33 arrives on the continent, this mythical, unexplored land, filled with danger and mystery. And only moments later, this old man steps out of the fog, accompanied by the thunderous, ominous boom, boom, boom of his cane. It is just fantastic sound design. Then, without uttering a single word, without showing any expression on his face, he cuts this guy's freaking head off. Holy crap. He is terrifying in that moment. Merciless, brutal, savage, completely mysterious. And then each of his subsequent appearances gets stranger and stranger. He can appear and disappear in places where he should not be able to. He has powers that don't make any sense. He clearly has a deep knowledge of the mysteries of this setting, but never bothers to share any of that. The first time you play, his dialogue will not make any sense. And then somehow, by the time you reach the final act, as terrifying as this guy once appeared, he will be completely forgotten. He might as well be irrelevant to the larger plot. In the end, he is nothing more than a shadow. With that said, this version of Renoir dies with the same justification as the real Renoir. He loves his family. He loves them so much that he cannot let go. He is willing to kill for that love. And apparently even willing to watch his wife and creator die a slow, agonizing death. Even her life is secondary to that of his son. because that was how he was made. I plan to do one final video about Clair Obscur. This will be an examination of Mael, and for this last essay, I want to move away from the theme of grief, which has dominated most of our discussion so far, and instead talk about some of the other themes of the game. Okay, see you then.
Dim dim da 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 dim dim da 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 dim da di dum. Dim dim da 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 dim dim da 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 dim da di dum.